Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, and especially to all the veterans allies, military families, we have a very appropriate, very important, very celebratory guest joining us this episode. We have very good news on the PAC Act. We have a lot to talk about on 1 year after Afghanistan. But first, we are going to celebrate and bring back a returning champion. Our friend, a truly great independent American, Matt Zeller, is back on the show. Welcome back to Independent Americans, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Glad to be here.
So, big night. Big
Yeah.
night. We
Yeah.
are
We did it.
we are recording this on Wednesday. Last night, the PACT Act passed. I'm so grateful that you're here. You've been instrumental. I want to go inside of it. I want to hear John Stewart stories. I want to know how you're feeling. I want to talk about what's next. But first off, congratulations, man. Congratulations to you and the whole team on a historic victory.
Brother, congratulations goes back to you. It was interesting. Just this morning, I woke up and I was, I picked up my phone instinctively to just kind of check what messages I had missed. And some of the folks from the IAVA team had dug up photos of the very first Facebook Live that anyone had ever done on burn pits, going back years ago now. And Tom Porter, who's IAVA's, senior policy guy and head of the Washington, D.C. office, said a couple of years ago, Paul suggested that we go to the Capitol and do a Facebook Live, conference that it was just us. No one else came to, and they have a picture of it, right? You contrast that photo with the absolute just media circus that was there to greet this thing when we finally got it over the finish line. And so, brother, the congratulations is to everybody. It's to you, right? It's to everyone who saw this as an issue years ago before people realized that it was as important as it needed to be. And, so brother, I just can't thank you enough for having the foresight and the determination to make sure that the Congress was going to pay attention to this and to kick in the whole thing off.
Well, this has been a long time coming. This was a long-term strategy that we developed over 15 years ago. I mean, we started thinking about and strategizing around this when Steve Robinson, one of my mentors who founded the National Gulf War Resource Center, talked to me about Gulf War illness.
Yeah.
And he said, this is going to happen to you guys. It happens every generation. So we laid the groundwork very early. And that press conference you talked about had 4 people. Yesterday, there was like 400. But it started even much earlier than that. I remember when we first put it in the IAVA policy agenda, when I first testified on it. I think it might have been 15 years ago, Matt. It was a long time ago. And I had to go on and explain what a burn pit was. And it took us a long time to get there. I want to get into the strategy. I want to get into the play-by-play. But I want to also ask you, it's the day after. Senator Gillibrand took y'all out for food and drink last night. I know what those celebrations are like. I'm bummed I couldn't be there. But where are you and how are you feeling today?
Well, for the first time, I think in about a week, I'm actually in my house with a shower and a clean change of clothing. Not, in day old, whatever, with the grime of DC and the summer all over me. The celebration last night was one for the ages. I've never seen a United States senator serve tables left and right, but she was insistent that she was going to personally serve every single veteran who stood fire watch dinner last night, and not just like bring them their meal and be like, hey, I hope you like it. Sit there and talk with them, thank them for their tireless advocacy and efforts. So I'm at home. I'm reflecting on it. Paul, I got to tell you, I keep asking people, did that just happen? It feels surreal in a way. A week ago right now, because we're recording on this on Wednesday, I recall this exactly. My mind was knee deep in, all right, I got a bunch of Afghan Adjustment Act stuff I got to worry on. It's about to be the 1 year anniversary of the Afghan evac. And I was also thinking, there's a vote later this afternoon on the PACT Act in the Senate. It's already passed before. This is just another thing we got to do because there was the House added a sentence when they voted on it. This shouldn't be an issue. And then I remember sitting there watching the vote going, this isn't going, there were only 14 no votes the last time. Once we hit 15, I was, what's going on here? 16, 17, by 30, I'm thinking this thing might not actually make it over the line. And that just, when it failed, you know, I can't tell you the sort of the low that everybody hit there, right? I mean, Senator Tester talked about it yesterday. He came to visit us at the Fire Watch, and he was telling us about, he's had low moments in his life, but he said that was amongst the lowest. And longtime IAVA member, one point staff member, Jen Birch, who has been just a phenomenal advocate for this issue, told him at that moment, Senator, we've been in tougher fights, and that kind of was what kicked the whole thing off of, we've been in tougher fights. All right, we'll just take it to the next level. We're not going to go home. We'll post a Fire Watch.
Yeah, and folks were galvanized by it around the world, right? This image of you and others sleeping on the steps of the Senate. The night before the vote, there was a rainstorm. It was hot as hell. And it became, I said this with Nicole Wallace on MSNBC, it became kind of like the Cindy Sheehan moment. Her son was killed in Iraq, and then she protested outside of George Bush's ranch, and it became a media circus, and everybody came to pay their respects or to see what was going on, to see how the showdown was going to shake up, right? And it's a very powerful organizing tool. So as soon as it started to come together, I think we all realized we had to lean into this and elevate it as much as possible. But I also got to tell you, man, I'm one of the few who was not surprised by the vote. Like, we've been here before also, and this is exactly what Tom Coburn did when we had the Clay Hunt bill on the 5-yard line right before Christmas. His mother was on CNN, and Coburn came in and blocked it. And it actually, I think, does us a favor. Like, if not for that block by Toomey and the shenanigans and fuckery that he led and a couple others joined, we wouldn't have gotten this level of attention. We wouldn't have had outrage from the country. We wouldn't have now all this level of understanding and all this momentum going into other stuff. And of course, we got to recognize Jon Stewart, who I hope will come on the show soon. He's done every show in America, including Newsmax, and he still hasn't been on with us, but I'm going to give him a pass because I think he was just incredible. Can you talk about him? Because I think he is like a strategic weapon, and the likes of which we've really never seen in the modern political environment, because he gets wins, right? Zadroga 1, Zadroga 2, now this. And we know if you deploy Jon Stewart, it changes the battlefield. So can you take us inside that? Rob Serra took us inside during the 9/11 fight. Sure. But what was it like to be around Jon? And when you actually take us through the moment where you walked into the Senate, because you got invited to go inside. And I said it was like the opposite of January 6th. It's how you legally, appropriately, patriotically go inside the Capitol. And that's what we saw. But take us through that and those moments with Jon Stewart and the circus that surrounded him, Matt.
Sure. So, the Fire Watch started last Thursday, and the people who kicked it off were Rosie Torres, right? The wife of injured Army soldier who actually couldn't be there because of his injuries. He was back in Texas. She was like, "No, we're just not going to leave the Senate steps." So Jon, Jon's like a tactical nuclear weapon, right? Like, he's a complete. You deploy him, and the battle completely changes. And Jon is best deployed when he can get on television and be Jon, right? So while we were doing our part on the Fire Watch, he was doing his part on the weekend, getting on every single show, picking a fight with Senators Toomey and Cruz and just taking it to him. But he felt he had to be there in person. So he came down on Monday. And, some celebrities, when they lend their name and their persona to a cause, will do only that. Right? They'll cut a TV ad or something. They'll do a couple of photos, write a check or two, and that'll be it. Jon came and showed up at 9-10 o'clock in the morning on Monday and didn't go home until about 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening, and was there he wasn't just there on Fire Watch. He would go into the Senate offices to try to meet with senators one-on-one. If he saw a senator walking down the street, he would immediately go after them and try to talk to them. And he understands that anything he does, there's a camera crew that's always, even it's not from his show, it's always a media frenzy that are just going to follow him. So the next thing what we realized was just like, well, John doesn't want the story to be about John. He wants it to be about us. So John then made a really effective use of just grabbing people left and right. And so it became this collective effort. Make sure John knows when there's like a really interesting, veteran who's just shown up, or a family who's lost someone, so that he can pull them into a media interview right then and there and continue to perpetuate the narrative and propel it forward. So he at one point, this Republican neo-Nazi agitator, Jack, I don't know how to say his last name, showed up and got right in John's face. And this guy learned a real valuable lesson real quick, because it was only about 5 seconds after John started yelling at him that every single veteran there, about 100 people, just surrounded John, got John out of the way, and then surrounded that guy and basically said, dude, you can't be here doing this to our advocate, our ally, our brother John. This isn't the right place, the right time. He just brings the thunder and everything. Right? he is on point, on message constantly. He's got this brilliant comedic mind too. So this is a hard issue. A lot of people there, when you've been outside in 98-degree heat with like 100% humidity, it's taxing. So he's constantly joking, and trying to keep the mood light. But let me take you to yesterday, because yesterday was the big day. He basically said, look, if we don't get this done today, we're going to really start putting pressure on Schumer, because now you all shouldn't have to be out here any longer. And so over the weekend, it was interesting. We kept getting pushed. We had started on the steps, and then on Monday, we got pushed off the steps, and we got pushed basically to the lawn that's directly across from the Capitol. And then with an hour of being pushed that lawn, we got pushed over to where we ended up, which was basically on a side lawn where you really kind of couldn't see us, and we had to make an effort to be known. John went to bat with us with Senators Tester and Schumer, and was able to get permission to have us come into the gallery to observe the final vote. And what we learned was that we were the first people allowed to observe of any procedures in the Senate since COVID. It was the first time that they've allowed us to do that.
Wow.
So they walk us
in since January 6th.
Yes. So they walk us into the where you line up to get into the Senate. And, they immediately go to John and they say, you can go in first. And he goes, they all go in before me. And he would not enter until every single veteran and person who had stood fire watch was allowed to go in, because he wanted to make sure they got to see it, not him. So they seated us in the gallery, and he was with one set of people, mostly. He's filming a whole episode for his Problem with Jon Stewart around this, so there's a lot of his production people, and because they went in last, they put them in a separate gallery. So we all kind of joked what it must have been like to sit there and have him kind of narrate the experience,
right?
But where I'm almost kind of glad he wasn't with us, because where we were, they're just, you kind of just sat there and no one said anything. We were just all taking it in. And Paul, I got to tell you, I'm going to get probably emotional talking about this next, because this is a moment that'll stay with me for the rest of my life. So I've watched a lot of Senate votes before. And when the Senate normally votes, there's almost no one in the chamber. Somebody motions, someone's there to second the motion, and they call for the vote. And then one by one, senators will come to the floor and vote and then leave. And there's, it's not like the scene out of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where it's this great deliberative body, right? They're almost never there as a full body itself. So they had 3 amendments that had been brought in to vote on, that all were Republican sponsored and died the deaths that they should have. But then it came time to finally vote on this whole thing. And Senator Moran, as the ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee, got to give a quick speech urging folks to vote for it. Then Senator Tester, as the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, got to make a quick speech, same thing. And then finally, Senator Schumer, as majority leader, gave the sort of last words. And then he said, and with that, I asked for the yays and nays, which is the formal way of asking who here will motion the vote. And it was at that point that every single member in the Senate who was there stood up to motion for it. And when they asked for a second, they all raised their hands. And then when they asked for the affirmative, they all raised their hands. And at that point, every single person when I say person, there was about 80 of us, 100 of us, just bawled. We lost it because when I say everyone, I was looking back at Vietnam veterans, with Marine Corps, whatever stuff. The hard is the hard people that you would never see shed tears. Every single person there was just in tears because the magnitude of it, the realization that it's not just the 3.5 million, burn pit victims from Iraq and Afghanistan. This covers every veteran who's been exposed to toxins going back to Vietnam. And, we had this saying, we were pulling fire watch for those who had died. We were pulling it for those who were dying. And most importantly, we were pulling it for those who would die if we did nothing. And to know in that moment that those people now don't have to suffer what so many others did, that there's going to be help for them, right? That there's going to be the care awaiting for them, that no one else is ever going to have to mortgage their home again to get the care for the injuries that they received in the line of duty. It was overwhelming. And so we've watched the vote actually went on for a really long time because they couldn't find Lindsey Graham. It took him forever to get back to the floor. And Senator Gillibrand at one point, pulls out her phone. He calls her, and as she's walking off the floor of the Senate to talk to him, she goes, "I'm trying to cover for you. Where are you? You're late." And again, just laughed. They finished the vote. We got out, and they basically told us we were all immediately being walked to a press conference outside. So we get ushered outside to this press conference, and again, media circus. I've never been on the opposite end of all of those cameras and everything. When it was all over, John was kind enough to take pictures. This is the thing about Jon Stewart is he took a photo with any and every single person who asked. He would do a video for anyone who asked. Can you call my mom? Sure. Whatever. There was no ask of him that he was going to say no to, right? So he somehow had managed to get the official roll call vote that the clerk of the Senate uses to tally as they're making their yays and nays. And he was taking pictures with it, for anyone who would be interested. And of course, I walked to him and asked him if I could take a photo. And then when the photo was done, I hugged him and I said, "Brother, I love you. I want to know, I hope you realize that it's not just about all the injured veterans that this is going to care for. Do you realize the children who now are going to potentially be born because their families will have financial security and they could actually potentially have kids, that they're going to have the resources to be able to provide for them going forward?" I said, "Do you have any idea what those kids might go on to do?" And then I looked at him and I got my one joke in with him. I said, "They actually might fix this place." He smiled and he walked away.
Matt, this is why I wanted you on the show. So you could take us through the TikTok, the play-by-play, the way it all went down, because I've been a part of these fights on the inside and the outside, and I know you only know what it's like if you're really there. And this is the context that people can't see. I was live tweeting all of the votes when Rand Paul's ridiculous amendment came up to pay for this only if they cut international funding, right? And then you had Senator Toomey with his gimmick that went down in flames. And then ultimately you had 11 people vote no. And I'm going to highlight this in the intro and I'm going to tweet it everywhere, which shatters the mind that this group of 11 people, it's the same we always see. It's Mike Lee and it's Toomey and now it's Mitt Romney, but 11 people voted no. And I think it's important that we had that high profile vote to make people stand up and be counted, but also to let people know we care. Right. And you talked about the kids. I think about myself and my exposures, and I think about what am I going to do if I get sick in 10 years? How on earth would my kids and I ever pay for it?
Mhm.
And now I know that my kids will know that if I get sick, there's a place for me to go. And amazingly, the VA popped up a PACT Act website like within an hour. It was the fastest turnaround I've ever seen in VA history.
Right?
It
That
also,
was incredible.
yeah,
It
yeah.
really was.
It also shows you how easy it would be for them to change the motto, which is something that they also need to do if they want to do
100%.
do the right thing. But let me ask you to and I want to go to the Afghan piece and the other pieces, but we talk about independent Americans and how they are people who want none of the above when it comes to the parties. And
Mm.
there's, the Andrew Yang thing that's now starting his party, but I've always said we don't want a party, we want a movement, right? We
Mhm.
want change. And I think yesterday was that kind of change because it didn't seem like anybody even knew if the vets were Republicans or Democrats or independents. They were all just united in fighting for change,
I
right?
have no idea of all, again, several hundred people came and stood fire watch. I have no idea if they're Democrats or Republicans. We actually been the only time we ever talked politics was we wanted to be abundantly clear. Everyone there was like, I hate politics, but this isn't political. This is Firewatch for accountability. We were determined not to let this be declared a protest or a demonstration, right? This was, again, something we wanted.
Right.
The sentiment was that, again, it was a movement. People didn't care
Right.
about labels or
Right.
identities. They
But it
cared
was, and I
about,
think this is important too. It is political. It wasn't partisan, right?
yes,
Like because it's a political process that I think people are afraid to be involved in. And I keep saying this was the opposite of January 6th. This was peaceful. This was legal. This was respectful. This was diverse. This was unified. I wish Donald Trump was watching this on TV. I wish he wasn't watching the last one. But this is something everybody was watching on TV and could be supporting and encouraging. And I really think it gave people hope, man. I think it gave people hope. It also is a reflection of how fucked up our system is because it took that long and it never should have taken that long. And we knew that it would only happen if we got Jon Stewart, and we knew it would only happen if the president talked about Beau Biden. So we said, I said it last night on Twitter, this was for Beau Biden. This was for people like my friend Steve Robinson and my friend Mike Zakia and so many others that I know the names of and you know the names of that most Americans will never know about. But let me ask you about the other juxtaposition here. This is happening 1 year after the Afghanistan pullout. You were on the show 1 year ago this week to talk about the Afghanistan implosion, something you predicted, something you tried to prevent, and something you've been working on ever since. After we won on Zadroga, the 9/11 bill, we immediately took that momentum and started the PAC Act, right? Now that we've got the PAC Act done, it feels like the Afghan Assistance Act,
Adjustment Act.
Adjustment Act, thank you, could be the next step. It feels like support for women, like changing the motto at the VA is the next step. Because now you've got this momentum, you've got this infrastructure, you've got new leaders that have been trained. So it's like, what's our next fight? And I know September is coming. I'm going to point people's eyes to this because we're going to come back in September. We got more shit to do. But specifically, 1 year later, tell us, how bad is it in Afghanistan right now? I've called it the great American betrayal of Afghanistan. They've had floods, they've had famine, they've had war, and I do want to talk about Zawahiri separately, but update folks if you can on where is Afghanistan now and what needs to be done.
Afghanistan is probably the worst place on the planet to live right now if you're a woman. Full stop. If you're a female, you absolutely have no rights. You cannot work. You can't leave your home without the escort of a male relative, and you're not allowed to leave the country without the permission of the government or a male relative. And the only two reasons why you're allowed to leave the country are either to perform the Hajj or seek medical treatment that's not available in Afghanistan. On top of all of the biblical calamities that they've had to endure from nature, they've got the one of the most repressive, evil governments on the planet, right? Or I shouldn't even say governments, groups on the planet that is ruling over them. There is no functioning judicial system, right? It's the will of their violence as they see it that day. We didn't evacuate the people that we should have. The government in the United States likes to point to this figure of 130,000 people were evacuated. Well, let's break that down. Of those 130,000, only 81,000 were Afghans. Of the 81,000 who were Afghans, only 3,000 of them were SIVs. And those 3,000 were evacuated prior to August 15th, to the fall of Kabul. They were evacuated, you might recall, July of last year. The government started formally the Operation Allies Refuge program, and were from July 17th to August 15th, were on average flying 2 planes out of Afghanistan a week. So 600 people a week, basically, were being flown from Afghanistan to the United States. Those were all SIVs. Everybody else, the remaining 78,000 people who got out, they were not SIVs. They were people either fortunate enough to make it onto the airfield, or they were the CIA's paramilitary units called the Zero units. So then what happened to the SIVs? Because you might recall a year ago, I was saying there's some 88,000 of them. Well, first off, turns out there's a lot more. Congress last year changed the eligibility requirements for SIVs from 2 years of cumulative service alongside the U.S. military down to 1. And that one move functionally massively increased the available applicant pool. So the State Department finally copped to the extent of the problem last month. There are, at current, 160,000 left behind former interpreters in Afghanistan and their associated family members. When you realize that the historical average is that most interpreters arrive with a spouse and 2 to 3 kids, you multiply simply by 4 what are the historical average. What we learn is that there's about 297, it's not 4, it's like 3.2. But anyway, if you multiply it, there's around 297,000 people that need to get out. Now, the Association of Wartime Allies and now IAVA have been polling the left behind Afghan population and veterans to learn, how are the Afghans faring? How are US veterans faring with this whole experience? We just finished polling so last week. So the results will be released. I'm giving you the exclusive kind of sneak peek here, okay? But the results will formally be released on the 15th of this month. And what I can share with you is that 40% of the SIVs that we were tracking prior to the 15th of August last year are no longer in communication with us. They're not here in the United States. They did not make it out. So either they have opted not to talk to us, which that normally doesn't happen, or they're dead. And we know that the Taliban have been conducting a brutal campaign to hunt down anyone who worked with the Americans or for the previous or for the legitimate Afghan government as like a security services person and kill them. We know that there's at least 2 mass graves in Kabul, in this prison complex called Polisharki that are inside the prison where they're burying the bodies. It's as, again, this Taliban are just the same evil, horrific people as the Taliban who existed in the late 90s and on September 11th in 2001. The only difference is that they have inherited a rebuilt Afghanistan and one of the largest militaries in terms of equipment in Central Asia. The Taliban currently possess more helicopters than the nation of Australia. They have one of the largest ground mobile infantry forces because of all of the MRAPs and Humvees that they acquired, literally on the Asian continent. One of the only larger militaries is China and Russia and India, right? And Pakistan, or maybe the Iranians as well. But the Taliban, there's nobody else who has that many Humvees or MRAPs anywhere else in the world other than the United States, right? So they are a very well-equipped force that has used those that force to create one of the most repressive, violent, and unfortunately impoverished places to live. They don't provide functioning services.
So, Matt, so you're painting a very vivid and effective and important picture of how bad it is because America's forgotten about Afghanistan now, right? I've called it Forgotistan. It's 1 year later. That 1 year anniversary will happen at the end of August when most folks are on vacation or getting ready to go back to school. We've now got the contrast of how quickly and effectively the U.S. government mobilized to support the Ukrainian population, and it shouldn't be an either or, but we do have a comparison now.
I have to
And
pause it there. Sorry.
yeah,
To that, it's in the last year, we have welcomed under 10,000 total Afghans who have been able to get out since the evac. Okay. Since the Uniting for Ukraine program was announced in mid-April of this year, we have welcomed 100,000 Ukrainians.
so 10x difference, right? And obviously a huge now money is no longer going to Afghanistan. It's going into Ukraine. Afghanistan has got this shell of a military that we created. So we've basically, created the army of Gilead for the Taliban. And most of the country is not paying attention. We're going to have the anniversary of 9/11 coming up, which will bring some attention back. And then this week, we had the very high-profile CIA killing of al-Zawahiri, who was, the legacy to Osama bin Laden, the spirit animal and spiritual leader of the movement that spawned 9/11 and resulted in probably every single attack related to the network since bin Laden and before bin Laden. They killed him with a drone on a balcony in Kabul, right? So he was in Kabul, which shows also how bad Kabul has gotten. Is that one of the most wanted people in the world? The FBI had a $25 million bounty on his head. President Biden did an address from the Oval Office on the balcony to update everyone. This is a significant military assassination, right? It's a killing of a high-profile leader. It's like a general to that network, but it's gone. It's already out of the media, right? Like people can say, okay, they killed another Al-Qaeda guy whose name I can't pronounce, another bin Laden lieutenant whose name I can't pronounce. I'm glad he's dead. As a 9/11 first responder, as an American, I think we're safe. We're some small bit safer and better because he's gone. But this is all upside down world now, where yes, we can kill from over the horizon. We don't have to have troops in the ground. You can send down a drone and take out a dude on a balcony when he goes for a smoke. But on the humanitarian and responsibility side, it's all gone. So this is a long-winded way of asking you, Matt. The PACT Act is done. 9/11 is coming. You've now got a new fight. Congratulations, you won. Here's your reward. Another fight, right? But you've got the momentum and the wind behind you, and hopefully we can take all those folks from Jon Stewart to President Biden and shift them over. What's the no shit likelihood of getting the Afghan Adjustment Act passed, and what do you think the legislative and political strategy is now to get that done?
I really believe we can get it done. I have talked to, just yesterday, 20 members of the United States Senate as they stopped by Firewatch, because that became the thing, right? Stop by, see the vets, bring them water, whatever. And I would pull everyone aside and say, hey, are you tracking the Afghan Adjustment Act? And I didn't meet a single person who was not tracking it. And I didn't know meet a person who is against it. And I talked to Republicans and Democrats. They understand the importance, because this bill would fix the SIV program. There's a major flaw in the SIV program. Every single person applying for one of those visas by law right now is required to undergo an interview at the embassy in Kabul. There's no embassy in Kabul. And unfortunately, only Congress can fix that. It's not like the Secretary of State can just ignore the law. So this would fix it. It would allow Afghans to undergo the interview at other embassies around the world, or even online in some kind of secure link. The other thing that it would do is all of the Afghans who got evacuated last year, who are not SIVs, were brought into the United States under something called humanitarian parole. And that's only good for a year. So it's about to expire at the end of this month. Now, it could be renewed, and they could renew it indefinitely, but Paul, God forbid Stephen Miller gets near anywhere of the levers of power, or Trump gets back in office. These people will be deported before you can say the word Afghanistan, right? So, and then where they're going to be deported to, back to the Taliban to be killed. So what needs to happen is this law has got to pass real soon. We're talking by the end of this calendar year, right? Because there's no guarantee that the next Congress will have the demographic makeups politically to support this. And there's no guarantee that we'll have the political will going forward. Here's the problem. We've got identified in right now in the Senate 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats who want to co-sponsor and introduce this bill. Same thing in the House, right? And the rule is 1-to-1 add, right? You confirm one, you get another.
Yep.
The biggest problem is the rules of the Senate currently allow for any individual senator to uphold a bill, to just hold it all up if they want to be a jerk about it. And in this case, the supreme jerk of this problem is Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. Simply put, the man does not like immigrants, doesn't like immigration, doesn't want these people here, doesn't believe they should have been brought here in the first place, would have no qualms about sending them back to where they came from. And as far as he is concerned, so long as he breathes and occupies his seat, he will not allow this bill to advance. We used to have an amazing ally and advocate, and you want to talk. Jon Stewart was a nuclear weapon. This is a thermonuclear weapon. Senator John McCain. He could put Senator Chuck Grassley back in his box. But Senator McCain's no longer with us, and I have yet to identify who is the one individual in the United States Senate who can make Senator Chuck Grassley understand that if we don't pass this bill, it's not just going to be about putting these people's lives into legal jeopardy, right? It's not going to be about the fact that, by the way, the federal immigration court system will collapse because overnight we're going to quintuple the caseload, right? Because we're going to drop 78,000 people into the courts all at once. I mean, there's not enough judges, courtrooms, or lawyers to cover them. No. This is going to hurt our national security going forward, because imagine the media's frenzy if folks found out that most of the Afghans who got evacuated were then subsequently deported. How would any future ally ever trust us to take care of them if they were willing to put themselves in harm's way to help us with our mission?
Well, let me stop you there, Matt. First of all, again, thank you for that shaping of the landscape. So there is the Afghan Adjustment Act that needs to be reintroduced in the Senate, needs to be elevated, needs to be galvanized, needs a media frenzy, needs shitloads of shame. So the strategy, in my view, is take the playbook off the wall. We got the PAC Act done. We pick a date in August or September, and we start the Fire Watch again. You start the Fire Watch again. This has become like our bonus march in a box, right? Like the bonus march after World War I, the veterans came down to get their bonuses, and it was terrible and bloody, but they were victorious in the end. And similarly, we have now been victorious in the PAC Act. So I don't think this needs to be overly complicated. We spin the same playbook back up. You ask every ally in the country that wants to be there. And if Jon Stewart's busy and Beyonce wants to show up, that's fine too. But I think this is not complicated, and we've shown that we can win. I think that's a big takeaway here is don't fuck with the veterans community. We are maybe the most powerful political force and the most effective political force in the country. So I'm going to put it out there in the wild and say, I'll be there. This show will be there. It'll be a part of it. Let's not overcomplicate it. Let's pull the fucking Fire Watch in September until we get it done. And we might have to pull 2 and stand outside the VA until they change the discriminatory motto that doesn't include women. So this is like, welcome to the new play call. Like this is Tom Brady calling the same slant over and over again. And we're going to keep calling it until they can stop it. So I think that's what folks should look forward to. And I also think it's a sign of hope. Like this is something we can all do. We can save lives. You can make a difference. Our politics are completely fucked up, but there is also a tremendous power in naming names. We made Pat Toomey famous. And we're going to make Chuck Grassley famous, just like we made Tom Coburn famous and we made Mike Lee famous. We're going to keep doing that until it's not necessary anymore. So I want to bring it back to maybe a last question for you, Matt, and I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll keep us updated. Everybody should, of course, follow you on Twitter and everywhere else. How do you feel about America? You've been up and down. You've been at the lowest betrayals of our government, and you've been inside there. And I think sometime soon you and Jon Stewart and others will be at the White House for a signing ceremony with the president. How do you feel about your country right now?
I've had a lot of worry for my country these last couple of years. And had the Afghan evac and this movement around the PACT Act not happened, I would be probably at the bottom of the barrel, right, in terms of my despair. But I got to tell you, Paul, as hokey as this is going to sound, I have tremendous hope. I don't have hope in a lot of our elected leaders. Quite frankly, I think a number of them are at the point where they should probably go and enjoy their twilight years, whatever they have left, and let a new generation come and take the reins. They seem to continue to think that this is an endless marathon, and they're forgetting it's a relay race. And part of being on a good relay team is knowing when to pass the baton, right? But man, the thing that gives me hope, the reason why I will at this point never say that this country is ever out of the fight, is because of the American people. During the Afghan evac, people from all walks of life, all different persuasions, just put all that aside and just there's a mission to be accomplished. It sounded impossible. It almost certainly was. And yet they worked without hierarchy, without authorities. They just came together. You keep always saying, I love this when you say, look for the helpers, right? Man, Paul, all I do is I keep looking around and I know the media portrays America as one way, kind of on fire and at each other's throats. I just spent the last week outside the Capitol, where you want to talk, there's no more partisan political environment than there. And everyone I met wanted to get this done, was supportive of it, was encouraging. Didn't matter what part of the country they came from, what their creed was, what their background was. No. They came together because they thought that this was the right thing to do. And so I think we are going to get out of this. And I don't think it, I know we will, because I know that the American people, when push comes to shove, come together and take care of each other. And this country is real special in that regards.
And you are very special in that regard. And when we say look for the helpers, we mean you. And to watch your work and your dynamism and your heart on display and out there as a sacrifice, on behalf of all of us. Like, many late nights I text you and we're talking and you're out working and you've been absolutely tireless. And it's harder for you because you're not a celebrity or a pseudo celebrity. You are a motivated person that shows us what is possible. And I hope you are in the Senate one day. I hope you run for office one day. We need you out there. And I know independent Americans in particular will have your back. But I just want you to know we appreciate you. We see you. We appreciate you. We love you. We're grateful for you. And this episode in particular and your journey is a teachable moment for all of us, but also an inspiration to our kids about what's possible. So I'm grateful for you. I hope you'll stick around for a couple quick-fire Patreon questions. I want to ask you about your Dodgers and maybe some TV and some other stuff. But until then, my friend, I hope you get some rest. Enjoy the air conditioning, and I look forward to joining you for many, many, many cold beverages sometime soon.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me.
Stay vigilant, my friend.